Welcome to Restoria. I'm Arthur, and this is your quiet place for gentle bedtime stories. Get comfortable, take a breath, and let the story slow your thoughts and ease you softly into sleep. The cabin at dusk. The track to the cabin ran out the last mile through pines, and you took it at walking pace, the tires turning over pine needles and loose stones. The trees stood close on either side. Between their trunks, the evening had begun to gather, not dark yet, only a thickening of the green, and the smell of the forest came in through the open window, resin, warm bark, and the dust of a dry summer track. You had driven since the middle of the afternoon to reach this, a week here with nothing asked of you and nowhere further to go. The track to the cabin ran out the last mile through pines, and you took it at walking pace, the tires turning over pine needles. The cabin showed itself at the end of the track, low and wooden, its porch facing the water. You had seen it in a photograph, then again in your mind on the drive up, and here it was, smaller than the photograph and kinder, the timber gone silver grey with its years of weather. A stack of split logs stood under the eaves. Beyond the roof, through a gap in the pines, the lake lay flat and pewter under a sky that had not yet made up its mind about the evening. You turned off the engine. For a moment you sat there in the ticking hush of the cooling car, your hands resting on the wheel, listening to a silence that was not empty at all. A wood pigeon called somewhere back among the trees. Water moved against a shore you could not yet see, a faint lap and return. The forest ticked and settled in the heat it had gathered all day and was only now beginning to give back. The key had been left where the letter said it would be, under a flat stone at the corner of the porch step. You crouched and lifted the stone, and there it was, an old brass key gone dull, warm from the ground. You have never in your life reached a door and used the right key first. There is always the wrong one tried, the little rattle and refusal, the turning of the ring to the next. Tonight there was only the one key, and even so your hand went to the lock twice before it found the way in. The door gave with a low complaint of its hinges. Inside, the air of the shut-up cabin met you, cooler than the evening outside, holding the whole silent record of the last people who had been here. Wood smoke gone cold in the stove. Wood smoke, the faint green breath of the pines that had worked its way in through every crack and seam over the summer. You stood on the threshold and breathed it, and let the house know you were there. It was one room, mostly, with a sleeping space raised at the far end up 3 wooden steps. A stove sat squat and black against the inner wall, its pipe rising into the roof. Under the front window, someone had built a bench seat looking out toward the water, its cushions faded to the color of old moss. A table, 2 chairs that did not match, a shelf of books left behind by other summers, their spines bleached pale where the sun had reached them. The track to the cabin ran out the last mile through pines, and you took it at walking pace, the tires turning over pine needles and loose stones. The trees stood close on either. You carried your bag in and set it down inside the door. There was no hurry to unpack it. There was no hurry to do anything, and that knowledge was settling into you yet after the drive, as water takes a while to go calm after the bucket is set down. For a week, the days would be your own. You could feel the held tension of the road beginning to loosen at the back of your neck, one notch and then another. For a week, the days would be your own. You crossed to the front window and stood where the bench looked out. The pines opened here, and the lake showed itself properly, a reach of flat water held between wooded shores. The far side had already gone to shadow. The near water still carried the last of the light, a pale pewter sheen that moved when the evening air touched it and settled again when the air moved on. Nothing crossed it. No boat, no bird, only the water keeping its own account of the failing day. A moth had woken somewhere in the room and begun its business at the window glass, a soft, irregular tapping. You watched it a moment, the pale blur of it against the pane, trying for the last of the outside glow. Then you opened the window a hand's width, and the cooler evening came in over the sill, carrying the smell of the water and the resin of the pines. The moth found the gap and was gone into it without your having to help. The moth found the gap and was gone into it without your having to help. The cabin would grow cold once the sun was fully down. You knew this as you know it in any place near water, that the day's heat is only lent, and the cold takes it back early. So the fire would be the first thing, not for the light, not yet, but for the company of it, the one live thing in the black stove that would keep you through the evening and turn the shut-up room back into a place where someone lived. There was no hurry to unpack it, there was no hurry to do anything, and that knowledge was settling into you yet after the drive, as water takes a while to go calm after the bucket is set down. For a week, the days would be your own. You could feel the Gredic spark for the first thing, for the one live thing in the black stove that would keep you through the evening and turn the shut-up room back into a place where someone lived. For a week, the days would be the first thing, so the fire would be the first thing, not for the light, not yet, but for the company of it, the one live thing in the black stove that would keep you through the evening and turn the shut-up reaching into considering times without much hurry. You would do the same when you left, for whoever came after you. There is a kindness in that, to lay a fire for a stranger you will never meet. You would do the same when you left, for whoever came after you. There is a kindness in that, to lay a fire for a stranger you will never meet. You would do the same when you left, for whoever came after you. You would do the same when you left, for whoever came after you. You would do the same when you left, for whoever came after you. You would do the same when you left, for whoever came after you. You would do the same when you left for whoever came after you. You would do the same when you left for whoever came after you. You would do the same when you left for whoever came after you. You would do the same when you left for whoever came after you. You would do the same when you left for whoever came after you. You would do the same when you left for whoever came after you. You would do the same when you left for whoever came after you. You would do the same when you left for whoever came after you. You would do the same when you left for whoever came after you. You would do the same when you left for whoever came after you. You would do the same when you left for whoever came after you. You would do the same when you left for whoever came after you. You would do the same when you left for whoever came after you. You would do the same when you left for whoever came after you. You would do the same when you left for whoever came after you. You would breathe in womp so you would still breathe in notes, so you would know yourself, so you would know my create an rhythmic body move, so you would know third point, and so you would know when it foga would eat that friendosan version of you would know through the Christmas whiz that would sweetenot your mind as it flamed to the paper. It caught at once a low blue edge running along the fold, and then the yellow came, climbing into the kindling with a faint, dry crackle that was the first real sound the cabin had made since you came in. For a week the days would be your own. You could feel a box of matches on the shelf above the stove, the tall kind made for hearths. You struck one and it took on the second pass. You stayed crouched there and watched it find its feet. A fire in its first minute is a delicate thing, and this one wavered, almost failed, sent up a thin thread of smoke that made you reach for the damper. Then the draught took hold in the pipe. The flame steadied and stood up. The kindling began to snap and shift, and a real heat came off the little blaze, touching your face where you knelt. You fed it 2 split logs from the stack by the door, laid them gently so as not to smother it, and closed the iron door to a crack. Then the stove began to tick as its iron woke to the heat. It is a particular sound, that ticking of metal expanding, unhurried and companionable. It joined the crackle from within and the settling of the logs. Already the corner of the room by the stove had changed. The cold, shut-up feeling was lifting from it. In its place came the smell you had been waiting for without knowing it. Wood smoke, clean and resinous. The smell that means a room is lived in and an evening is being kept at bay. Now you took off your boots. You sat on the edge of the bench to do it, working the laces loose and easing each foot free, and the floorboards were cool, smooth under your feet through your socks. You set the boots by the door where they belonged. Your feet were glad of their freedom after the day of driving, and you flexed them against the wood, and some tiredness you had been carrying in your legs announced itself now that there was room for it to be felt. Now you took off your boots. You sat on the edge of the bench to do it, working the laces loose and easing each foot free, and the floorboards were cool, smoothing. You held it grounded, cream outside the window. The pewter had gone from the lake, and the near shore had joined the far one in shadow. The sky above the tree line held a last band of color, dusty rose fading up into a rich and gathering blue. You did not turn on any lamp yet. The firelight was enough, thrown out through the crack in the stove door in a low flickering fan across the floorboards, moving as the flames moved. You unpacked only what the evening needed and left the rest. A jumper pulled on now against the cooling air. Your wash things carried through to the little back room and set on a shelf by a basin. A book laid on the bench where you would find it. The bag itself you pushed to the foot of the bed with the rest of its contents yet inside, because unpacking a whole bag on the first evening of a holiday is the act of a person who has not yet understood that the holiday has already begun. Then on this example, where the Samoa said with Groip, smiling, "You know this feeling birthed by Sitrose, don't you? We know that character was heated through the paywall, and beside it a box of matches and a can of paraffin. This colleged, you lifted the chimney, turned the wick up a little, and touched a match to it, and the flame ran along the trimmed edge, settling into a steady leaf of flame. You lowered the chimney back over it and turned the wick down until the room held just enough glow to see by. The lamp and the stove between them made 2 centers of heat in the gathering evening, and you moved between them, unhurried, at home already in a house you had known for an hour. The lamp and the stove between them made 2 centers of heat in the gathering evening, and you moved between them, unhurried, at home already in a house you had known for an hour. On the shelf by the basin you had found a single mug with a chip out of its rim, an old enamel thing, white gone cream with age, and a blue line round the top broken where the chip was. There were other mugs, whole ones, in the cupboard, but you took the chipped one because it fit the hand well and because a slight flaw in a thing you were going to use every day for a week is a comfort rather than a fault. You would drink from it each morning and each evening and come to think of it as yours. The kettle was a heavy black thing that lived on the top of the stove, and you filled it at the basin tap, carried it through, and set it on the iron surface above the fire. It would take its time. A stovetop kettle is in no hurry and cannot be hurried, and there is nothing to do while it heats but wait, which on the first evening of a week with nowhere to be is not a chore but a gift. You sat on the bench by the window with your feet drawn up and waited for the water to think about boiling. There were other mugs, whole ones, in the cupboard, but you took the chipped one because it fit the hand well, and because a slight flaw in a thing you are going to use every day. Through the window the evening went on, emptying itself of light. You watched it go. The lake had become a dimmer version of the sky, the two of them meeting at a tree line that was losing its edges, and the first star showed itself over the far shore, faint and then a little less faint, as if it were being turned up by a careful hand. You did not look for others. You let that one be enough, and by the time you thought to look again, there were 3, and then more than you could easily count. The lake had become a dimmer version of the sky. The two of you, the kettle had begun its low song, that first thin note a stove kettle makes well before it truly boils. The fire had settled into itself. The wild early flames were gone, and in their place was a steady burning, the logs glowing along their undersides, the whole stove giving out a heat now that reached across the room to where you sat. You could feel it on the side of your face and along your arm, a heat with a source, honest and particular, nothing like the flat heat of a switched-on room. The fire had settled into itself. The wild early flames were gone, and in their place was a steady burning, the logs glowing along their underseas. The kettle came to the boil while you watched the water yet. You knew it by the change in its voice, the thin song thickening to a full and rolling note, and you rose, crossed to it, took it from the heat by its wooden-handled lid. There was tea in a tin on the shelf, loose leaf, and a little brown pot with a cork stopper. You spooned the leaves in and poured the water over, and the smell rose at once, dark, grassy. The pot grew warm between your hands as you carried it to the table. You let it stand and steep while you lit no more lamps and made no more work. The chipped mug waited. The lamp burned low on the table. The stove ticked and glowed. Outside, the last of the dusk had gone entirely now, and the window had turned to a black mirror that gave you back the room, the little leaf of the lamp flame, the red seam of the stove door, your own shape sitting calm at the table with the pot before you. The check pages. When the tea had steeped, you poured it, and it came out of the pot a deep amber. You wrapped both hands around the enamel mug and felt the heat come through into your palms. The first mouthful was very good. It was strong and a little bitter, and it tasted of the smoke of the room. It heated you from the throat down. You sat with the mug held under your chin and let the steam touch your face between sips. There was nowhere you would rather have been. There was nowhere else you had to be. There was nowhere else you had to be. There was nowhere else you had brought a little food for the first night, not wanting to shop after the drive, and now a slight hunger stirred, the plain, honest hunger of a body that has travelled. There was bread in your bag, a wedge of hard cheese, a few apples, and that was supper enough, and better than enough. You fetched them out and set them on a plate from the cupboard, and cut the bread with a knife you found in the drawer, its handle worn smooth by other hands over other summers. You ate by the fire, the plate on your knee, in no particular hurry. The bread had gone a little dry from the day in the bag, and the heat of the stove had softened it again where the plate sat near the heat. It tasted of nothing much and of everything, as plain bread does when you are hungry and at ease. The cheese was firm and keen on the tongue. The apple, when you came to it, was cold yet from the drive and sweet, and its crispness was loud in the quiet room. The cheese was firm and keen on the tongue. There is a particular contentment in a plain meal eaten alone in a heated room, with no one to talk to and nothing to do after. You were not lonely in it. The fire was company, the lamp, the great black lake beyond the glass, and the owl that had not yet called but would. You ate without haste and watched the flames through the crack in the stove door, and let the food do its calm work, the heat of it spreading out from the middle of you to meet the heat of the fire coming in from without. When the tea had steeped, you wiped the plate with the last of the bread and set it aside for the morning. The washing of it could wait. Everything could wait, and that was the whole shape of the evening. One thing after another allowed to wait until it simply dissolved and stopped needing doing at all. You brushed the crumbs from the blanket into your palm and leaned to drop them out through the cracked window for the birds to find in the morning, and drew the window to again against the cooling evening. Tiny pans came across the water then, low and round and carrying the call of an owl somewhere along the far shore. It came once and you waited, and after a while it came again, a little further off. Not a mournful sound, whatever the poets say, a working sound, a bird about its evening, the ordinary business of the woods going on around your one lit room as it had gone on for every summer before this one, and would go on after. You listened until it moved out of hearing among the trees. The tea went down by degrees, a mouthful at a time, and with each one the day receded a little further. The drive up, the week of work before it, and the tying off of 100 fine threads so that you could leave with a clear head. All of it was behind you now, on the far side of that track through the pines, and here there was only the fire, the lamp, the black window, and the tea cooling by degrees in your hands. The holiday had you now. It had closed over you like water over a swimmer, and you had stopped kicking against it. All of it you got up once to feed the stove, opening the iron door to a wash of heat and light, laying another split log onto the red bed of the fire, and watching it catch at its dry edges before you closed the door again. The wood was pine, and it burned quick and bright, throwing a resin snap at intervals, a faint report that made you smile in the hush. The stack by the door would see you through several evenings. Tomorrow, in the daylight, you might split a little more from the round pieces you had seen under the eaves, for the pleasure of the axe and the smell of the fresh-cut wood. Back on the bench, you drew a blanket down from where it hung over the seat, a rough wool thing in faded reds, and laid it across your knees. The weight of it was a comfort. There is something in a blanket over the legs that speaks to an older part of us than words reach, that says the day is done and the body may put its burdens down. You tucked it in at your side. The fire heated your front and the wool held that heat against you. The window kept its cool black distance, and between the two you sat exactly balanced, neither hot nor cold held. All of it was balanced, neither hot nor cold held. The stars had thickened over the lake. Where there had been 3, there was now a whole scattered field of them, and their faint glow lay down on the flat water in a broken path that reached from the far shore almost to the foot of the porch. You watched the path waver and knit itself and waver again as the evening air moved across the surface. No moon yet. The moon would come later, you thought, and climb the sky while you were past caring, and lay its own brighter road across the water for no one to see but the owl. Your phone had lost its signal somewhere back along the track through the pines, a mile or more before the cabin, and you had felt the slight tug of that at the time, and then, past the last bend, a greater, stranger relief. No one could reach you here. Nothing could arrive with its small demand, no message, no ring, no faint glow blinking in the dark to say that somewhere the world went on wanting things. You had turned the thing off entirely and put it away in the bag, and it lay there now, dark, silent, a stone in your pocket set down. The hush that took its place was not empty. It was full of the things the noise usually covered, the fire, the water, the wind in the pines, and under those a deeper hush again, the plain fact of a night in a wooden room by a lake with nowhere to be and no one to answer. You had forgotten a hush could be so full. It pressed in gently from every side, from the far corners of the room and the black water beyond the glass, and it held you rather than pressing on you, the way deep water holds a swimmer who has stopped fighting it. All of it was behind you, on the far side of that track through set down. The firelight had taken over the room as the last of the dusk drained away. It reached out through the crack in the stove door and laid a low, moving fan of gold across the floorboards. Where it met the legs of the table and the frame of the bench, it threw shadows up the walls, tall and faint, that swayed with the flames. You watched them move. There is an old comfort in firelight on a wall, older than lamps, older than windows, a thing the body knows without being taught. The firelight, then, the pattern of it never repeated and never quite changed, a faint flickering play across the timber that asked to be watched and rewarded the watching with nothing but itself. A knot in one of the wallboards caught the glow and seemed to open and close as the shadows crossed it. The spines of the books on their shelf glowed along their tops and went dark along their bottoms. Your own shadow sat large and calm on the wall behind you, moving when you moved, still when you were still, keeping you company from the timber. Where you let your eyes half close and the firelight softened further, the edges of everything going gentle and gold. The room seemed to breathe with the fire, brightening a little as a flame rose, dimming as it fell, and your own breath had begun without your noticing to keep time with that faint brightening and dimming. In and a little brighter, out and a little lower, the whole little wooden world of the cabin rising and falling on the fire's own tide, and you at the middle of it, eased, unhurried, content to watch the light until it burned itself down. Where it met the lake as the evening deepened, not enough to chill the room through the cracked window, only enough to move the tops of the pines. You heard it before you felt it, a soft wash passing through the high branches, coming from the far shore and crossing the water and arriving at the trees around the cabin. The spruce nearest the porch took it and gave a heavy sway, its boughs lifting and settling. The sound of it was like the sea heard from far inland, a breathing among the needles that rose and fell and rose again. You had known a place like this once, a while ago. Not this cabin, not this lake, but a summer of your childhood spent somewhere near water, in a borrowed house that smelled of pine and lamp oil, much as this one did. The memory came up on the wind through the branches, unhurried, asking nothing. You had been small. You had lain awake in a strange bed, listening to exactly this sound. The wind in the trees and the water on the shore, half afraid of it, half held by it, until the holding won and you went under. Where it regulated under shadow cabinets and scents, it was always gamishing people, not listening for the speech of cabris, didn't need the knowledge of nutrition, and nor thought was the time you wait until you seed a greeting with this same wind cross the same kind of water. You found in it nothing to be afraid of, and everything to be soothed by. The trees had been doing this before you were born. They would go on well after, swaying and settling on their dark shore, keeping the wind's own time, whether or not anyone sat by a window to hear them. Where it met all wells you were thinking about. You let the memory go as gently as it had come. There was no need to hold it or follow it back. It had risen and touched you, and now it settled again beneath the surface. The wind moved on across the pines, the fire ticked, and the tea was down to its last cool inch in the mug. You drank it off and set the mug on the sill. The path of the stars still lay on the water, a little dimmer now, and the owl had not called again. The stove had come fully into its heat. The whole iron body of it radiated now, and the corner of the room around it had become a pocket of true summer, while the window held the cool of the northern cold an arm's length away. You could have moved closer to the stove or further off and found any temperature you liked in the little space of the room. You stayed where you were on the bench, in the balance point between the fire at your back and the cool glass at your side. The blanket kept its heat across your legs, and you felt no wish to move at all. The path of the state, a second moth or the same one returned, had found the lamp and circled it now at a careful distance, learning the heat of the chimney. Its shadow wheeled huge and soft on the ceiling as it went round, a grey turning. You watched it a while without wishing it away. It settled at last on the heated glass of the chimney and held there, wings folded, content. Its great shadow above steadied and settled, and the room was still again, but for the fire, the wind, the little tick of the cooling kettle on the stove. The tiredness of the day had spread all through you now, and it was a good tiredness, the honest weight of a body that has traveled and arrived. It sat in your legs, your shoulders, behind your eyes, and rather than fight it, you leaned into it, as you lean back into a chair that has been made to hold exactly your shape. There was nothing left of the evening that needed doing. The fire would burn down on its own. The lamp would keep its low flame. The evening would look after itself, and you along with it. The fire would burn down on it somewhere. Out on the water a fish rose and fell back, a single soft plosh in the dark, and the rings of it spread unseen across the black surface toward the shore. You did not see it, only heard it, and the hearing was enough. The lake was going about its evening as the woods were, as the wind was, a whole world of little unhurried lives carrying on in the darkness beyond the glass, while you sat easy and quiet at the one lit point in all of it, keeping them company without needing to join them. The lake was going about its evening as the woods were, as the wind was, a whole world of little unhurried lives carrying on in the darkness beyond the glass, keeping them company without needing to join them. You thought, drowsily and without pursuing it far, of the days that lay ahead, mornings on the porch with the mist coming at water, the lake for swimming when the sun was high, the fluthing with the Dew Express captive dough toileting straight out from the shores. You exerted a lot of creativity. You had no tu parentis, you had longings ag vegi, you had memories circlet by the hill. You had all done so can now go past the torment so you could rest. The future displent the same a big difference, worrying against the wind moments, continued it, coming the quick frigresses. The wind eased. The pines took a last deep breath and grew calm. The wash among the needles died away to nothing, and the lake settled to glass again under its field of stars. In the new hush, the fire was the loudest thing in the world, its little collapses and settlings, the whisper of flame over the last of the logs. You added no more wood. What was in the stove would be enough to see the evening out, and you wanted now to watch it burn down rather than build it up, to let the glow lower itself by degrees toward the dark. Two low chairs stood out on the porch. You had seen them coming in, their arms silvered by the weather. You thought of the mornings to come, of carrying the chipped mug out there at first light with coffee steaming into the cool air off the lake, of sitting with your feet up on the rail while the mist lifted off the water and the day came gradually awake around you. The thought eased a corner of you that had been cold a long while. There would be time for all of it, whole unhurried days of it, and none of it needed thinking about tonight. In the new hush, the fire settling toward its embers, and the lamp holding its low flame, and the black window with its field of stars, you had everything the evening could want, and nothing it did not. The week lay ahead like the lake itself, wide and calm, yours, and you were in no hurry to begin it, because beginning it would mean the first evening was over. The first evening, for a little while more, was gently going on. The first evening, for a little while, was gently going on. The first evening Sucobliatus, equimist, before the fire burned down, you wanted the night once, properly, from outside. So you rose, the blanket yet round your shoulders, and crossed to the door, lifted the latch, and stepped out onto the porch. The evening air met you, cool and clean off the water, and it smelled of pine, lake, the far green cold of the forest. You stood on the worn boards in your socks and let the door rest closed behind you. The one lit world of the cabin was at your back now, and the whole black reach of the lake lay open in front. The one lit world of the cabin was at your back now. The stars were far more than the window had shown. Out here, with no glass between, the whole sky stood open overhead, thick with them, from tree line to tree line. A great faint spill of stars banked across the middle of the sky, where the faint band of the galaxy lay. You tipped your head back and looked up into it until the looking made you dizzy, until the porch seemed to tilt gently under you, and you were not looking up at the stars so much as out into them, held on the little lit boards above a great depth. You had gone entirely to black glass. It held the stars doubled, the real ones above and their trembling copies below, so that the shore you stood on seemed to hang between two skies. Nothing moved on the water. The wind had not come back, and the surface lay so still that the reflected stars barely shivered, only breathing a little where some current you could not see passed under them. You breathed with it, the cool air going down into you and coming out as the faintest ghost in front of your face, there and gone. The wind had not come back, and the surface lay so still that the reflected stars barely shivered, only breathing a little where some current you could not see passed under them. You breathed with it, though it was not silent, though a city person might have called it so. The forest was full of little sounds once you stood quiet enough to hear them. A settling in the undergrowth somewhere along the shore. The distant single call of the owl back at its work. The water finding the stones at the lake's edge. A faint lap and draw. A faint lap and draw. The oldest patient rhythm there is. You stood in the middle of it all, one warm creature on a wooden porch, and felt yourself to be a slight and welcome part of a very large hush. The cold began to reach you through your socks and the blanket, and you did not mind it, because it made the thought of the heated room behind you sweeter. There is a pleasure in standing at the edge of the cold when the heat is only a door away, a pleasure the whole evening seemed made for. You gave the stars one last look, and the black water its doubled sky, and the far shore its outline of ragged pines. Then you lifted the latch again and stepped back inside, and the heat of the room closed round you like a held breath. The cabin seemed brighter and closer after the great black outside, the lamp and the stove two friendly points of gold in the wooden room. You stood a moment inside the closed door and let your eyes come back to the near scale of things, the table, the bench, the shelf of sun-bleached books. The cold of the evening was on your clothes and in your hair. It met the heat of the room and gave way to it, and you felt the change go through you as a kind of ease, the body glad to be back within walls. The cabin seemed brighter and closer after the great black outside. You put the kettle back on the stove, more for the company of its heating than from any real thirst, and while it woke, you went to the shelf of books. They were an odd company, the books people leave in such places, a swollen paperback thriller, a guide to the birds of the region, a book of crossword puzzles half filled in by a hand you would never know. You took down the bird guide and turned its soft pages by the lamp. You found the owl and read that it was a tawny, that the round call you had heard was the female, and the answering hoot the male. The Edscript seemed a splitting between the words, and knowing it changed nothing, and yet there was a quiet pleasure in putting a name to the voice on the far shore. You set the book back exactly where it had stood, in the pale gap its own spine had bleached into the shelf over many summers. The kettle had begun its thin song again. You made a second cup in the chipped mug, weaker this time, more for the heat of it in your hands than the taste, and carried it back to the bench by the window. The toint derogatory gave you the room again, the lamp, the red seam of the stove, your own shape settling onto the cushions with the mug held close. You looked past your reflection to the stars beyond it, and found you could hold both at once if you let your eyes go soft, the near-lit room and the far cold field of light, the two of them laid one over the other in the single pane. It was a good thing to look at. It asked nothing of you and gave a great deal, and you sat with it a good while, letting the second cup cool. The heat of the stove had filled the whole room now, evenly, so that even the corners by the door had lost their chill. You loosened the blanket from your shoulders and let it fall around your waist. The jumper was almost too much in the heat, and you thought idly of taking it off and did not, because the slight effort of it was more than the moment wanted. Instead, you sat lower on the bench, your head back against the wooden wall, the mug resting on the blanket over your knee, and let the heat work into you as sun works into a stone. Time had loosened here as it had loosened on the train of some other traveller's evening, though you did not think of trains, only of how little the hour seemed to matter. You could not have said whether you had been in the cabin 2 hours or 4. The evening had no edges to it, no appointments cutting it into lengths, only the unhurried business of a fire burning and an evening drawing on, and a body coming to rest. This, you thought, was the thing you had driven all that way to find, and it had been here waiting, as such things always are, needing only that you pause long enough to feel them. This, you thought, was the thing you had driven all that way to find, and it had been here waiting, as such things always are, needing only that you pause long enough to feel them. This, you thought, was the thing you had driven all that way to find, and it had been here waiting, as such things always are, needing only that you pause long enough to feel them. This, you thought, was the thing you had driven all that way to find, and it had been here waiting, as such things always are, needing only that you pause long enough to feel them. The lamp had burned down a little, its leaf of flame gone lower and steadier in the chimney. The stove ran on its deep, even heat. Everything in the room had come to its evening rest, and you were the last of it yet upright, and even that was beginning to seem like more than the evening required. The stove ran on its deep, even heat. Everything in the room had come to its evening rest. The fire lowered itself while you watched. The flames that had stood up over the logs sank into them, and the logs themselves lost their shape, became a bed of embers, a rich and breathing red banked along the floor of the stove. Through the crack in the iron door it threw less glow now, and what it threw had gone from yellow to a rose gold, and the flickering across the floorboards eased as the flames that made it ease. The room dimmed by the smallest degrees, and your eyes went with it, asking nothing they had not already been given. You rose from the bench at last, the blanket held around your shoulders, and crossed the room to the 3 wooden steps that led up to the sleeping space. The floorboards were heated now near the stove, and cooler as you moved away from it. The bed was a low wooden frame with a good mattress and blankets folded at its foot, and it stood under a window of its own, a lesser one that looked out the same way toward the water. You turned the blankets down and sat on the edge of the bed and looked out at the evening through the low glass. From here, The lake filled the whole window. The stars had wheeled a little in the time you had sat by the fire, and the field of them lay tilted now above the black tree line, and their broken path crossed the water yet, fainter, patient, going nowhere. You could see no detail of the far shore any more, only the darker mass of it against the star-strewn sky. The world had simplified itself down to a few plain things: water, trees, sky, the low red glow of the stove behind you, and the leaf of the lamp on the table below. You lay down on top of the blankets first, just to feel the bed take your weight, and it took it fully, and a full breath went out of you that you had not known you were holding. The mattress held your back and your legs and your traveled bones. Above you, the wooden roof rose to its ridge, the grain of the boards just visible in the last of the firelight. You lay, looked up at it, and felt the whole length of your body giving itself over to the bed, one part at a time: the feet, the legs, the small of the back, the shoulders, each in its turn letting go. The mattress returned to the face, and you thought this Shayand living now tracks you through the water scent, understood that Trelebus creep. You bent immediately, stoddled them, just to stay the northing. The insulation reached you if you smoked the Futsaweti. You can smoke for shots of the salt at it if you would. You can tune it fundamentally in the first minute when you can scream Romsent or Solent versus Romith metals. You lay on your side facing the window, the covers drawn up to your shoulder, and watched the stars over the black water. The stove ticked as it cooled, slower now, the intervals between each faint sound stretching further. The embers behind their iron door breathed and dimmed. The lamp on the table burned steadily, throwing its low glow up the wooden walls. You knew you should rise and turn it out, and knew equally that you would not, that you would let it burn its little measure of oil down while you lay here, because getting up now was more than the evening asked of you. It would gutter out on its own before the evening was through, and no harm done. The wind did not return. The pines stood calm on their shore. That every so often the lake gave a low sound, a lap against a stone, the rise of a fish, and each one came softer than the last, or seemed to, as your hearing sank down toward the place where sounds stop being things to notice and become only the texture of the dark. The owl was well gone into its own evening's work. The cabin held you in its wooden hush, held at its center where you lay, cool at its edges where the window met the stars. Above you, you thought of nothing much. The day had emptied out of you at last, and no tomorrow had yet come in to take its place, and in the space between them your mind lay as calm as the lake, holding the stars without reaching for them. An image drifted up, the flat stone and the brass key warm from the ground, and drifted off again. Another, the first star, turned up over the far shore by a careful hand. They came and went without weight, the little pictures of the evening, loosening as they went, until they were less like pictures and more like the feeling of the blankets on your shoulder. The full bed had your whole weight now and asked for nothing back. Your breathing had gone deep and even without your arranging it, as it does at the edge of sleep, each breath a little fuller than the thought before it. The red of the stove had sunk to almost nothing, a last low ember glow that lit no more than its own narrow mouth. The lamp burned on. The stars held their places over the water, and the water held them. The whole calm weight of the evening lay gently down over the cabin and everything in it. Moments were still skilled. The cabin settled around you into its deep evening hush. The boards of the walls gave the odd little creak as the last of the day's heat left the timber, an old house easing itself, nothing more. You had come to know the sounds of the place in a single evening. The tick of the stove, the creak of the wood, the water at the stones, and they had stopped being strange and become the plain furniture of the dark, things you had stopped hearing because they were simply there. A place becomes yours faster than you would think. It takes only one fire and one evening at the window. A place becomes yours faster than you would think. The last of the embers held their low red behind the iron door. They needed nothing from you now, and would give their heat back to the room by degrees through the small hours, well after their light was gone. You lay under the blankets and felt that heat reaching you yet across the room, gentle and diffuse, no more a fire so much as a heat the whole cabin held. Your feet were warm at the bottom of the bed. Your shoulders were warm under the wool. The cool of the window lay against your face, and the two met at your cheekbone and held you exactly between them. The cabin settled around you into its deep evening hush. The boards of the walls gave the odd little creak as the last of the day's heat left the timber, an old house easing itself, nothing more. You had come to know the sounds of the place in a single evening. Their broken path still lay on the lake, dimmer now, the way a thing seen at the edge of sleep grows dim, and you watched it without holding to it. A star would sharpen for a moment as you looked and then soften. Then you would lose it among the others and not trouble to find it again. The whole field of them wheeled so gradually that no eye could catch them moving, and yet by morning they would all have gone west and set, others risen, the sky turning its great wheel above the cabin all night whether or not you watched. Your breathing had gone slow and deep. It had found its own measure without asking you, deep on the draw and fuller on the release, and the blanket stirring with it in the near dark. The mattress held you fully. There was no part of your weight that the bed did not carry, no muscle yet holding itself up, and the letting go had spread now the whole way through, out to the tips of your fingers where they lay curled on the wall. You had arrived, not just at the cabin, but at the rest you had come here for, and it had closed over you as gently as the blankets had. You had arrived, not just at the cabin, but at the rest you had come here for, and it had closed over you as gently as the blankets had. You had come to know the sounds of the place in a single evening, the tick of the stove, the creak of the wood, the water whole way through, out to the tips of your fingers where they lay curled on the wool at rest. You had arrived no more just at the cabin, but at the rest you had come here for, and it had closed over you as gently as the blankets had. It did not rise to help it or to hurry it. It would keep its little light while it had oil to keep it. Then it would ease itself out without a sound, and the room would be lit only by the stars and the last low breath of the embers. The cabin settled around you into its deep evening hush. The boards of the walls gave the odd little creak as the last of the day's heat left the timber, and all the water lapped at the stones below the porch, small and even and patient. A lap and a draw, a lap and a draw. It had been doing this before you came and would do it after you left, keeping the shore as the wind kept the pines, an old patient work that needed no watcher. You listened to it soften as your hearing sank. Each small sound came a little further off than the last, or seemed to, until they were less like sounds than like the feel of the dark itself, moving gently at the edges of the room. You listened to it soften as your hearing sank. Each small sound came a little further off than the last, or seemed to, until they were less like sounds than like the feel of the dark itself, moving gently at the edges of the room. You listened to it soften as your hearing sank. Each small sound came a little further off than the last, or seemed to, until they were lamented by the Sabai. It had daubness, a small minute penisric texture, and the blankets kept their weight, and the whole night went on with its own unhurried work outside the glass, asking nothing of you at all. You lay warm at the center of the wooden room. Your eyes had closed, or nearly. The last red of the fire was a low seam behind its iron door. The lamp was a low, steady bead on the table below. The lamp was a low, steady bead on the table below, and their broken path lay on the water, growing dim, growing kind. The lamp was a low, steady bead on the table below. It had been doing this before you came, and would do it after you left, keeping the shore as the wind kept the pines, an old, patient work that needed the water stomached at the stones. The pines held their hush, the blankets held their weight. The heat of the long-burned fire lay in the room like something breathing, slow and low, and you lay within it, held. The cape of the Nantes pawn forwards end the seas if it was printed, The mortar weights Brachipist remained concrete, stood there smoothly pressing, keeping the indicator as it holds the flock Basididae. The last ember settled in the stove with a sound almost too soft to hear, and the cabin held it all, warm and even at the edge of the wide and starlit night.